Hello there! Today I thought I'd bring you a bit of a different video. So there's been a few videos about growing up going around recently, started by Lena. I will link her video down below. She's been answering 40 questions for each day of Lent, and one of the questions was about how do you deal with growing up and how does it feel to grow up. Her points were really interesting. I would definitely recommend looking at her video. In response to that, Jane Campbell also made a video, which again I'll link down below, and again was fantastic. I'm not going to do a discussion video about this because I think both of those videos are plenty to be going on with, and I think that they say everything that I could possibly say about the subject. Instead, I thought I would incorporate books into the conversation and look at books that in some way or another discuss the idea of growing up. I wasn't sure what format I wanted to do this in, whether I wanted to talk about books that helped me growing up or books that I think are important to read as you're growing up, but I decided that the best way to go about it would be to just look at books that solely look in some way or another at the idea of growing up in itself or the idea of growing as a person. I think there are some really interesting books about this conversation because I think it's one of those things that everybody experiences and we all experience it in quite a similar way. So I think it's important to read things about this, and we're going to get straight into it with Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This had to be in there, of course. This is about a lot of things, and again I will actually link another video from Jen down below. She actually did an analysis video of this last week, which was absolutely fantastic. One of the main themes running through this is the idea of growing up, and it starts straight away when we meet Wendy and she realises that she is immortal, that she is one day going to grow up, and the novel goes on from there. But throughout, Peter Pan is also fighting his nemesis, Hook, who is a man who is kind of a manifestation of Peter's own personality, but an older version of him. And obviously, Peter's main point is that he's never going to grow up, and he's constantly fighting against this idea of growing older. So he is constantly fighting against Hook, but also Hook himself is fighting against time in the form of the crocodile with the ticking clock. And there are various ways that this book looks at the different concepts of growing up and the fear surrounding that. I think it's actually one of those books that, even though it is a kid's book, it's very much more enjoyable if you're an adult, because there is so much intertextuality and important stuff in here that you just wouldn't pick up on if you were a child. But in terms of growing up, it doesn't get much better than this. Then I've got something a little more light-hearted, and that is Sue Townsend's Adrian Mole series. I've only got The Growing Pains of Adrian Mole because I gave away all my old Adrian Mole books, but I think this is worth putting in there. This is a bit of a different one because obviously it's quite literally about the growing pains of a boy called Adrian Mole. We meet him when he's 13 and the series goes on. I would say the first two are definitely the best in the series. It's just funny, light-hearted. I think it kind of puts a light-hearted spin on the trials and tribulations of growing up. And instead of looking at sort of the struggle against growing up, it looks at how it feels to be a child looking at older people and growing up yourself and going through the trials and tribulations of young adulthood, and also the sort of desire to be older than your years and to act like a mature adult because you think that that's going to be all grand and fun, but actually we all know that it's not. I would definitely recommend these if you haven't read them. They are so good. I haven't read them since I was a child and I really do want to get to them again. Then I've got To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Again, I haven't read this in a very long time, so I might get things a bit wrong, but from what I can remember, this is from the point of view of a girl called Scout, and basically there is a lot of racial prejudice in her town. There is one black man who lives in a house that is pretty much just ignored by the rest of the street. It's sort of thought of as this haunted, shameful place. He's also on trial for rape, but basically he's just being discriminated against because he's different and because people don't understand him and they don't try to understand him. I think the reason that I've included this here is, from my memory, this is very much about the difference between children attitude and adults attitude, and sort of where the line blurs between the innocence of children and the sort of harsh judgment of adults. And I think it's really lovely. It's basically about the fact that Scout kind of views this black man in a completely different way to the adults of the street, and of course in a more literal sense it looks at growing up because Scout is quite literally growing up. We follow her growing up through summer. And in a similar kind of vein, I have got Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. This is a sort of semi-autobiographical look at one of Ray Bradbury's childhood summers, and it's a summer where he first realises that there's death and that they are going to grow up. It's a really lovely book that I don't hear enough about. I definitely want to reread this one as well. It basically just looks at that realisation that summers that are so long and sprawling are not going to last you your whole life, and that you are going to get older. And it sort of looks at that very pivotal moment where you go from being an innocent child and thinking that that's all your life's ever going to be, to suddenly realising one day you're going to be one of these crazy adults that you're surrounded by, and it's sort of how he deals with that, and it's so lovely. Then I've got Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. This is a little really sweet book about a seagull called Jonathan Livingston who he wants to fly but make it a kind of art. He wants to know why he flies. He gets all philosophical and he wants to be the best at flying, and the other seagulls don't understand because they're just thinking we just fly for the sake of getting food. We don't fly because it's fun. We don't fly because it's meant to be beautiful. But Jonathan doesn't understand that. It's very much about a philosophical growth more than a literal growth, although obviously Jonathan grows up throughout the novel. But it kind of looks at that idea of a young seagull wanting to be the best that he possibly can be, and how he can go about pursuing his dreams even in the face of adversity. And then finally on the novel front, because I've got a few non-fictions here as well, I've got The Edible Woman by Margaret Atwood. I'd say this is probably, in terms of growing up, especially if you're in your sort of early 20s and sort of trying to deal with this dilemma of going from childhood to adulthood, this is a fantastic one. It basically looks at the breakdown, effectively, of a girl. She's in her early 20s, she's just got engaged, all her friends are getting married and having children, and she's just not feeling it. Doesn't feel as though she's ready. She hasn't reached that adult point yet, and it completely unravels her. It's so funny. It's just so relatable as well. I would definitely recommend this one. Then on the non-fiction front, I have got Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal by Jeanette Winterson. This is a fantastic memoir about Jeanette Winterson's early life and how she sort of, again, overcame some hard circumstances to follow her dreams and become the adult that she is today. It fits into the growing up genre purely because it follows Jeanette as she grows up, but I would definitely recommend this. It's such a good read, and it's got the normal vivacious writing of Jeanette Winterson. It's just fantastic. Then I have got two books that I'm going to talk about together, which are Just Kids by Patti Smith and also M-Trained by Patti Smith. So Just Kids was her first memoir, and it looks at her life as a young artist and her relationship with a photographer called Robert Mapplethorpe, and it just looks at basically the creative life that she was living, and it's really, really fantastic, and I would definitely recommend this for anybody. I'd say it's one of my top reads of all time. But what's really nice in the growing up stakes of this, not only obviously the fact that she's quite literally growing up throughout the novel, it starts when she's very young and we leave her when she is just getting married and having children and things like that, but it also looks at the importance of friendship in shaping who you are as you grow up, and the importance of keeping your friendships alive as you grow and as things change, and also again about the idea of following your dreams even though you're growing up and you're getting these other responsibilities. So there's that one. And then alternatively there is M-Trained by Patti Smith, and I think I wanted to talk about this one with Just Kids because this is written when Patti Smith is a lot older. She's lost her husband, she's in her 60s. It's another memoir. It's a very different style, but I think it's interesting to compare the two because obviously Just Kids was written at a time where she was just growing up and just experiencing life, and she was full of everything and excitement. And M-Train is such a gentle and slow-paced novel, and it's kind of got a real resignation about it as well, and it's quite a sad novel, and it's quite a shame, but I think it's an interesting look at growing up to read the two together and look at the difference between the styles. Then I've also got another two that I wanted to talk about. These are kind of more in terms of growing up, as in growing as a person after you've been through a hard time. So there's Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. This book meant a lot to me when I was in my very early 20s, and it kind of really helped pull me out of a slump. I would say that this is very spiritual, so if you're not into spirituality, it might not suit you. You might be better off watching the film actually, which kind of takes the spiritual aspect down a notch. When I was reading this, I was very into spirituality and I was quite curious. I reread it last year and it didn't quite strike the same chord with me, but basically this is about Elizabeth Gilbert's just realising that she wasn't happy with the life she was living, and she left her husband and went travelling, I think for a year, and it just follows her journey through travelling and her journey growing as a person and regaining her place in the world after she lost her way. And then we've also got Wild by Cheryl Strayed, which isn't the best book, but I think it's still worth mentioning. This is about Cheryl Strayed's mum has died. She breaks up with her husband and gets addicted to heroin, and then she decides to just leave everything and walk the Pacific Crest Trail in an attempt to find her way back to her life. And it's sort of about what she realises about herself while she's there, and we look back at how much her mum meant to her when she was growing up and how much her mum had an influence on the person she is now. And it's sort of just about her growing past that tough patch in her life and moving on as a better person for it. So they all look at growing up in different ways, some in terms of growing as a person quite literally, and some in terms of growing as a person, but I think they're all important and worth mentioning, and they're all fantastic books, so definitely check them out if they sound like your cup of tea, and I'll see you next time. Bye!